Hi guys, welcome back to my channel and welcome to my April reading wrap up. April was a pretty good reading month for me overall. I'm happy with the number of books that I read. I read 7 books total. 3 of those were adult romances, 1 was a general fiction, 2 were YA fantasies, and 1 was a YA romance. So I'm really happy with the number of books that I read. It's a step up from last month and I'm definitely out of that weird reading funk I kind of got into in March. I would say about half of the books I read in April I really loved, really enjoyed. We did have a 5-star last month, which is always amazing. The other half I would say were just kind of mid, kind of so-so. There weren't any that I really strongly disliked or hated, but of this other half I wouldn't really highly recommend them to everyone. So kind of a mixed bag, but overall I would say a pretty good reading month, and I'm so excited to share all my thoughts and opinions on these 7 books that I read. So let's jump right in. Starting out with Say You'll Remember Me by Abby Jimenez. This is her latest release that came out at the very beginning of April. I would say going into 2025 this was my #1 most highly anticipated read for the year, because Abby Jimenez's book from last year, Just for the Summer, ended up being my favorite book of 2024. So I had high hopes going into this one. I had a feeling I would love it, but I wasn't completely sure I would love it as much as some of her other books because the storyline didn't sound quite as intriguing to me. I wasn't as drawn to the characters, but nonetheless I was still excited. I love Abby Jimenez. I love her writing and her books. So in this one we follow our male main character, who is a grumpy veterinarian named Xavier. He ends up meeting our FMC Samantha when she comes in. She brings in her kitten for an appointment. They get off on the wrong foot, but they end up making amends when she comes in a second time with her kitten for another appointment. Xavier ends up making things up to her. He asks her on a date. Xavier and Samantha really hit it off on this date. They have the best time, but from there, for different reasons, for various factors, they are kept apart from one another and it's not really easy for them to maintain a relationship. I know this book is getting so many polarizing reviews. I feel like for every 5-star I've seen an equal amount of 1-star ratings. I've also seen everything in between. I've seen some 3 stars, 2 stars, 4 stars. I've just seen every rating all across the board. This book is getting so many mixed reviews. And to be fair, I completely understand the criticisms that this book is getting. It was a little insta-lovey, which is normally my least favorite trope, but I do think Abby Jimenez did it really well. Normally insta-love does not work for me at all because I hate when a relationship starts out with a physical connection. It doesn't really feel like there's an emotional connection. I can't really buy into a relationship like that, but I feel like in this case it worked because yes, the physical connection is what made them want to go on the date in the first place. They were attracted to each other, but once you see them connecting on this date, you realize that they have great chemistry. They have a connection outside of this physical attraction, so that I could overlook. Also, the TikTok references, our male main character getting compared to Rizan, so valid. Honestly, I wish I could take out the parts about Rizan from this book. That is really my biggest and only critique, but I still gave this 5 stars because I loved everything else about it so much that I could overlook the criticisms and overlook the things that weren't my favorite, and I still think Abby Jimenez wrote them in a way that just worked. I always say this, but I think Abby Jimenez does the comedic aspects of a romance as well as the emotional aspects to a romance so well. She just blends them together perfectly and it makes it feel extremely realistic. Our characters are going through so many hard things in their personal lives and there's so many things that they have to conquer together, things that are keeping them apart and making it so hard for them to be together. But despite that, I was still rooting for them. I wanted it to work so badly. I really cared about these characters. I feel like I know Abby Jimenez's characters so well. They feel so realistic, so fleshed out to me. I love how we get these little anecdotes about them that just make them feel like they come off the page. They feel like real people. This book had me laughing out loud. There were so many funny parts that I just had to tell someone what was happening in my book, and then like 2 pages later it would have me bawling crying because something unexpectedly so sad happened. I would definitely check trigger warnings because there are a lot of heavier things in this book, specifically the things going on with Xavier and Samantha regarding their families. I will say I think the romance in this one was toned down a bit, and the family dynamics, what was going on with Samantha and her family, was more of the focus. There were definitely moments that were so hard to read, but I think it added to making this book feel even more realistic and more more raw and made me feel more invested and connected to these characters, and I just wanted them to be together so badly. I don't know, I totally get all the criticisms, but this one just worked for me. I think I just click with Abby Jimenez's writing so well. Like, her sense of humor is my sense of humor. I just connect to her characters. They feel like my friends. When I wasn't reading this book, I was thinking about it nonstop, and I couldn't wait until the next time I could pick it up. It just read so easily, and it was one of those books that I was flying through, but I also didn't want it to be over. And I will say it was a 5-star, but I didn't love it quite as much as Just for the Summer and Yours Truly. Those to me are 6-star reads, and this sits a little below that. I wouldn't consider this a 6-star read, but it was still a 5-star for me because I just had the best time reading it, even though it was hard and raw and sad at times. There was also humor in it. I just love Abby Jimenez. This definitely solidified for me that she is one of my very favorite authors, and I cannot wait for the next book in this new series. Then I read Finale by Stephanie Garber. This is the third and final book in the Caraval trilogy, and there's not too much I can say about the storyline of this book without spoiling books 1 and 2, but I will say this trilogy follows two sisters, Donatella and Scarlett. In the first book, we're following Scarlett and her adventure at Caraval. The second book is following Donatella and some of the aftermath that happened in book 1, and then book 3 follows both sisters. I love that we got Donatella and Scarlett's perspectives, and they're kind of going on an adventure together, but you also see them going on their own adventures and figuring things out, and there's various things that happen along the way. And I really enjoyed this one. I gave it 4 stars. I thought it was such a great way to wrap up this trilogy. These books just feel so whimsical and so magical to me. Some of the descriptions, they just feel like stepping into a fairy tale. I will say some parts of the magic system feel a little bit convoluted to me, and like we're kind of making things up as we go along, but by the end I did think everything wrapped up well and made sense to me. And my favorite part was definitely the sister relationships. I loved seeing Donatella and Scarlett, seeing them work together, and just their bond and their love for one another was one of my favorite parts of this whole series, in addition to the magic and the whimsy. It's just such a fun series to read, and I would definitely recommend it. And most of all, the way it ended made me so excited to read the Once Upon a Broken Heart trilogy, which is the spin-off series to this one, following one character that we meet in here, and I cannot wait to see where this character's story goes based on how things ended in here. I'm very intrigued, very excited. I feel like people love the Once Upon a Broken Heart trilogy even more than the Caraval trilogy, so considering how much I love this series, I'm hoping to love that one even more. So I cannot wait. The first book is on my TBR for the month of May. I'm planning to pick it up very soon, and excited to share my thoughts with you guys. My neighbor just started mowing his lawn, and it's really noisy. I'm hoping that you can't really hear it, but we're gonna power through. I'm gonna try to talk over it, and hopefully it's not super noticeable. Okay, and the next 3 books that I read were for a reading vlog where I attempted to finish reading books that I had DNF'd in the past. And the first book I finished for that video is The House in the Ceruan Sea by TJ Klune. This is a YA fantasy following our main character, Lioness. He is like a social worker, and he ends up getting this work assignment where he has to go out and visit this orphanage. He has to write a report to determine if the orphanage can stay open or not, because all of the children there are various magical creatures. And I ended up giving this one 3.25 stars. I had picked this one up a couple years ago, started it, and I was enjoying it, but one day I just put it down and never picked it back up again. It's definitely a book that is outside of my comfort zone, so I think I have to be in a very specific mood for this type of read. And I will say, when I picked it back up again for the video, I was in the mood for it, but I just don't think it was completely my thing because it didn't completely work for me. This book is YA, but it almost felt a little too juvenile at times, to the point where it kind of read like middle grade. My favorite part of the book was definitely the children, but I do think the way they were written at times was a bit heavy-handed. It was almost like I was trying to be convinced to love these children, and I didn't need to be convinced because I loved the children. They were definitely my favorite part of the story. They were so endearing, so charming, so funny. They all had very quirky senses of humor that just added something special to the book, and I loved that there was this theme of celebrating our differences. I really liked that part of it, but just the way they were written at times was a bit much. I didn't love our main character, Linus, though. He was a very logical and realistic type of character, which worked well for his job, because his job was like his whole personality and his life, and he had to go and write this report and be very objective and not show any bias towards the children. But it didn't work in terms of me connecting with him throughout the whole book, so he definitely got on my nerves at points. Overall, I don't think I would read book 2 in this series. I would be interested to look up spoilers online to see what happens because it did end off on a bit of a cliffhanger. I think it's just personal preference. This one didn't really completely work for me. Definitely some things that I liked about it and enjoyed about it, but just overall not really my thing. The next book I read for that video is Better Than the Movies by Lynn Painter. I picked this one up and started it I think a couple years ago. Only got like maybe 2 chapters in, and then I just had so many other things I needed to read that this one got pushed to the back burner. But it has been high up on my radar for so long. It's one of my 25 books I want to read in 2025 because I know it's such a fan favorite, and I just had to see for myself what I would think of it. I've read a few books by Lynn Painter now, and she hadn't worked for me in the past, so I was curious to see what I would think of this one because I think this is definitely her most popular book. But this is a YA romance. We're following Liz and Wes. They have been next door neighbors since childhood, and at the time we're following them, it is their senior year of high school. It's the months leading up to prom season. Another guy who used to be one of their childhood neighbors and moved away ends up moving back. It's a guy named Michael. Liz has always had a crush on him, and she really wants him to ask her to prom. So Liz and Wes end up teaming up. Wes tries to help Liz out so that Michael will ask her to the prom, but in the process they might develop feelings for one another. And I gave this one 3.75 stars. I do think it was just a little bit of a disappointment for me, maybe because I went in with such high expectations. I really liked Liz and Wes and their dynamic. They had really funny banter. Wes kind of picks on Liz, but it wasn't in like a mean bullying kind of way. It was like in a fun way because he knows her so well. He just knows how to get under her skin. So I thought they were really cute together. The storyline was definitely my favorite part of this book. It really did read like a 2000s rom-com movie, which I'm sure was the intent, and so that was done really well. I had such a fun time reading this. I feel like it had all the classic scenes. We had like the makeover scene, party scenes, the prom scene. It was just really fun, and I feel like the scenes jumped off the page and I could visually picture everything as it was happening. I also thought the pacing of it was really good. It was very fast-paced, read so quickly. I flew through this book, and I think the progression of the romance was also really well paced. Like their feelings felt like it really progressed at the perfect time. Nothing ever felt rushed. It was the perfect slow burn, but it didn't feel too slow. I feel like it happened very naturally. But I don't know, I just never got super invested in anything happening. It was fun and it was cute and I enjoyed reading it, but I didn't really feel like in it with these characters. I don't know again if it is just because I had such high expectations. I was trying to think of what could maybe make me feel more connected. I do kind of wish we got a little bit of Wes's perspective because we only see things from Liz's point of view, so we only know what Wes is thinking and feeling when he tells Liz, which definitely made the slow burn more of a slow burn since you don't know what Wes is thinking. But I don't know, Liz could be kind of a frustrating character. She didn't make the best decisions. She wasn't always the best friend or the best family member, and I definitely could see where she was coming from at times, but she wasn't my favorite, so I think maybe those are some of the reasons I didn't feel fully invested in it. And another thing, I feel like I read a good bit of YA, and oftentimes I don't connect to it because I get it, I'm not the target audience, I'm not a high schooler, but I do feel like I still can connect to YA because it feels nostalgic and it takes me back to certain times in my life, and I didn't really feel that with this book. It didn't really transport me back to my senior year. I don't know, it could just be a disconnect with the writing style. I would like to try some of Lynn Painter's adult novels and see if maybe those work more for me. I think this was just a slight disappointment for me. It didn't quite live up to all the hype, but I still gave it a good rating. It was still fun and enjoyable, and I'm glad that I finally finished it. The last book that I read for that video is Daydream by Hannah Grace. This is book 3 in the Maple Hill series. I read this right when it came out last year at the end of August. Read it through September, and I remember putting a bookmark in it, put it down one day, and I just never felt like picking it back up again. So I decided to pick it up and finish it out for the video. But this was probably my most highly anticipated book of this series because our male main character that we're following is Henry, and from the moment we met Henry in Icebreaker, I was like, I cannot wait for his book. I feel like he was definitely the fan favorite character. Our female main character is Hallie, and she is a romance book girly who's trying to write a romance book of her own, but she doesn't really have much experience when it comes to dating, so she's struggling to find inspiration and examples to pull from for writing her own book. So she agrees to tutor Henry in exchange for him taking her on dates, giving her new experiences to help inspire her writing and finish her book. And this one was also a bit of a disappointment for me. I gave it 3.5 stars, which isn't a bad rating, but I just hoped it would be so much higher because I was so excited for Henry's book. I think on paper, Hallie and Henry were literally my ideal characters to read about in a romance book. Hallie was so relatable. She is, again, a romance girly, more of an introvert, likes to stay home, has a cat. I just related to so many things about her, and she was so sweet and so kind. And then Henry, obviously the fan favorite character, loved him. Golden retriever, best sense of humor, so sweet and attentive and kind. And I think on paper, literally, they were like the perfect characters for a romance book, but together it was just kind of boring and bland. I appreciate that Hannah Grace doesn't have much miscommunication or there's no third act breakup in her books, but it left me wanting some kind of conflict. They had things going on in their personal lives, but I think together it was just missing like the angst and the tension and the passion. So it got a little bit boring and a little bit repetitive. So it just felt a little flat to me because I just wanted more. But the reason it's not rated lower is because I love this series. I love the found family. I love being back in this world. I think had this been just like a standalone romance or maybe the first in a series, I would have rated it lower, but because of the familiarity of being back in a series that I've already loved the first 2 books, it bumped up my rating a little bit, but it was sadly a bit of a disappointment. So the 3 books that I read for that video kind of let me down a little bit. None of them were bad. Like, I enjoyed my time during it, but I think they just all left me wanting something a little bit more and didn't completely work for me. The next book that I read is Adelaide by Genevieve Wheeler. I listened to this one on audio in tandem with reading it on my Kindle because it is on Kindle Unlimited. And this was one of my 25 books I wanted to read in 2025 because this one gets compared to Normal People, which is one of my favorite books of all time. So anytime someone compares something to Normal People, I have to give it a try for myself. In this book, we follow our main character, Adelaide, who is an American living in London. She ends up meeting a guy named Rory, and it follows their relationship, situationship. It's very slice of life, a little bit more mundane, so there's not much I can tell you about the storyline, and I know that's not really selling it, but it did feel very similar to Normal People, and I really enjoyed this one. I ended up giving it 4 stars. Definitely check trigger warnings if you need to, because this book touched on very heavy topics that I was not expecting before going in, and I kind of wish I had known about beforehand. It just caught me off guard, so just know going in that some heavy things are talked about in this book, but I just thought it was extremely well written. I was so engrossed in this story. I was so invested in Adelaide, and I didn't even necessarily relate to her much as a character. I felt like she was quite different from me, but I still felt very invested in her, and I cared about her, and I really enjoyed reading about her. I think so many people will unfortunately see themselves in this story and in this situation, because if you haven't been with a Rory yourself, you definitely know of someone or know someone who has been with a Rory. I really enjoyed the writing style. I thought there were so many great quotes in this book. It was very, again, mundane and slice of life. We're really just following Adelaide over the course of her life in this situationship. We get a lot of her backstory. So if you don't love a character-driven book, this might not work for you because there's not a whole lot of plot, but those kind of stories personally are my favorites. So I felt very connected and invested in this one, and I really enjoyed my time reading it. I will say the ending felt a little bit predictable. Like, I kind of guessed where things were going quite early on, but still really enjoyed it, and I would highly recommend it if you love a character-driven slice of life kind of story. And the last book that I read in April, I snuck this one in and read it the last couple of days of the month, is The Switch by Beth O'Leary. This one actually was on my TBR cart when I was filming my May TBR, and I'm glad that it didn't get picked because I was just in the mood for a cozy springtime read at the end of April, and this one just hit perfectly. I feel like I read it at the perfect time. In this book, we have 2 female protagonists. We have Lena. She is a 20-something-year-old living in London in the city. She has this corporate job, and things at work aren't going so well for her, so her boss ends up asking her to take a few months off. And then we follow her grandmother, Eileen, who lives in the countryside. She lives a very suburban kind of life. She is also kind of going through it because her husband just left her for another woman, so she is heartbroken and she's dealing with the aftermath of that. So the 2 two women decide that they are going to swap places. Lena is going to live in her grandmother's house in the country, take over her responsibilities, which include being part of this neighborhood planning committee. And then Eileen is going to live in Lena's apartment in London, and she's gonna join some dating apps and try to find a romance again in the city. And I love this one so much. I gave it 4 stars. Beth O'Leary, I feel, is an author that kind of goes under the radar for me because I've never given any of her books 5 stars, but I rate all her books so highly. I love them all. To me, they read like a classic cozy British rom-com. There's just something about them that I love. If the premise sounds good to you, I think you will love this one, and I would highly recommend it because it was just written so well. I loved following both women and getting their perspectives. I also listened to a bit of this on audio because Daisy Edgar Jones narrates Lena, which I loved. I thought both narrators for Eileen and Lena did a fantastic job, so it was fun to listen as I read along physically. It was just such a great time. I was rooting for both women. I wanted them to thrive. I loved seeing both women kind of be out of their comfort zones, but they both had different strengths that they brought to the new situation that worked so well. And then they also like took away different things from the situation that made them grow as people, and it was just such a good read. I really love this one. Perfect for the springtime. A lot of this takes place around Easter, and it's also leading up to this like May Day celebration, which is on May 1st. So I literally read it at the perfect time, and I would highly recommend it if it sounds good to you to read it during the spring because it was just the perfect read to cozy up with. It made me feel really hopeful. I loved the themes of new beginnings, and it was just so endearing and so charming, and I had the best time. Even though this one is classified as a rom-com, I would say it almost leans more women's fiction. So just such a great time. Could not recommend this enough. This definitely solidified for me that Beth O'Leary is one of my favorite authors. I just love her writing. It works for me. I love her characters. They have this like quirkiness to them that just is so fun to read about. So those are the 7 books that I read in the month of April. That is going to conclude the wrap up. Let me know if you guys read any of the books that I've read, what your thoughts are on them. Let me know how your reading month was in April, what you liked, what you didn't like. Let's chat down below in the comments. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed, and make sure you are subscribed to my channel by hitting the red button down below to stick around. I would love to have you guys here. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all so soon in my next video. Bye guys.